Hey guys, so it's time for a Q&A kind of session. I put together some FAQs and some questions that you guys asked me over the last week when I posted, go ahead and ask your questions about the 17 HMR ELR shooting that I'm doing. Some of you guys know I've been shooting out at 1,000 yards with my match rifle and custom loads, and for about a year I've been doing that kind of work, and I've come up with kind of a list of questions that I get asked all the time. There's a few in there that just over the last week came up that I don't get asked a lot, but they were kind of good questions. So I kind of said, you know, it can be about me, it can be about the gun, it can be about the ammo, it can be about just anything having to do with shooting the 17 HMR long range and what I'm doing with these things. So I put them on my laptop, so let's go ahead and start out. So one of the top ones that I get is why shoot a 17 HMR instead of a 17 WSM or a 17 centerfire? It's a really good question. So I compete with the 17 HMR, and because I'm competing with that caliber, I know it inside and out, and that's actually how I got into creating my own custom loads. I'll get into more of that in a bit. But I really love the caliber. It's great. I have a farm. It's really good for varmints around the farm and stuff. So it's one of those things. It's not about making it easier, which a lot of people are, well, you can get more powder, you can get this, you can get that, you know, it's flatter shooting. It's not about that. It's about a caliber that I absolutely love, and it's about a challenge that, you know, you take a 338 to 1,000 yards and there's no challenge to it. You take a rimfire out to 1,000 yards, it's a whole different ball game. So part of it is the challenge, part of it is the comfort with the round. So kind of that's why, you know, it's just one of those, like, why not? This one came in this week and it made me actually laugh out loud. What is your go-to excuse for missing a shot? Okay, so if you've watched many of my videos, I generally will own up to, if I screw up a shot, I'll say, yep, that was me. You know, it wasn't the gun, it wasn't the ammo, that was all me. But sometimes I'm not convinced that it is me that screwed it up. So my go-to excuse is wind. And any guys that shoot rimfires, especially longer range, you know that wind has a huge effect once you get out past 300, 400 yards. So I would say that probably 9 times out of 10, I say, it must have been the wind. What is the bipod that you're using? I hear this one all the time because I don't use a bipod that is the typical look. So let's take a look. Okay, so here is the bipod that I'm using. You'll notice it is super wide. Has these rounded feet, which allow for it to slide or make adjustments. It's got adjustments on each leg. Those are your tightening rods. There is a cant lever in the back. So this is aluminum, and it's water jet cut, so you can actually see slight variations, maybe if it won't focus on my table. But it is an awesome bipod. I run these on several of my rifles, and there's actually a version that has an elevation knob that comes down here for fine elevation changes. I don't find I need that on this rifle, but I do use it on some of my other long range rigs. But really cool. It's a Sinclair F-Class bipod. If you want ultimate stability, For shooting off a bench or off the ground prone, I would recommend looking into these. Okay, so what trigger am I using is the next question. On this particular rifle, I'm using a Hyperfire Eclipse trigger. It's a really fantastic trigger. I have a lot of friends that do gear reviews. One of them recently asked me about what trigger I'm using. He uses a lot of high-end triggers, and he purchased a Hyperfire Eclipse trigger, dropped it into one of his lowers, I believe on a 6.5 Grendel, and he was absolutely blown away by the trigger. He said he won't go back to the other brands that he was using. So it is a fantastic trigger. I run several of these Hyperfire Eclipse triggers, and I also run the Hyperfire 24C on some of my other rifles, which is basically the same trigger, only the Eclipse is a nickel boron coated trigger. So it's just a hair smoother than the 24C. So let's take a look at that. Alright, so unfortunately you can't see the silver color because of the lighting, but it's a straight trigger. You can kind of see it. It's a straight trigger, and I've got what's called a trigger shoe on there, which is adjustable up and down, and that allows me to put my finger exactly the same place, exactly the same way on the trigger every time. And if you don't know anything about Hyperfire triggers, let me show you what makes them so different. So I went ahead and unlocked, and let's look in. If you look at a standard trigger group, it looks nothing like this. This dual spring design is amazing. It basically makes it where your lock times from the time you pull the trigger until the hammer falls about half of a standard trigger, and it hits way harder than a standard trigger. So the lighter the pull, the heavier it hits, which is completely backwards from a standard trigger. Okay, so the next question is, and this is one of the most popular questions that I get, why not a bolt gun? They're more accurate, blah, 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 blah. Okay, this may get a little bit technical, may sound a little dry, I'm sorry, but just want to explain to you guys why I'm using this particular semi-auto. So, basically a bolt gun, what makes it so accurate is that there's no moving parts. You have the bolt completely locked in, stays put till the round is fired, and you manually cycle that bolt. What makes this gun unique is that it is a gas-operated delayed roller locking system. That's a mouthful. And then when I tell people that, they're going, okay, well, what does that mean? How does that work? So let me kind of walk you through how this works and show you a little bit. All right, so looking at this receiver, automatically, hopefully you see something completely different from normal. Not only the way that the bolt looks, but you've got this right here. So this hole is the roller locker that I'm talking about, and there's an identical one on the opposite side of the upper. This is not a standard thing. This is part of this action. So what makes this equally as accurate as a bolt gun, and why I chose this style, what happens when you fire is that if you look up there, you can see this upper line right here is the gas key. And what happens is when you fire, let me pull that action back a little bit, you can see that that moves backwards. That also doesn't happen on a standard gun. So when you fire, the gas, and it's a true gas system, you can see the gas block right there. The gas pushes this gas key back. And what happens is these balls are locked in to the upper. And once that gas key gets pushed back, those balls are unlocked, but they stay in the locked position basically from the force of the powder and the burn going down the barrel. So that will stay locked even though that gas key has moved a fraction of an inch backwards. That will stay locked until the bullet has left the barrel. And once the bullet has left the barrel, that allows the gas pressure to drop, and that is what allows those balls to finally come disengaged, drop back into the bolt carrier group, and the entire system to cycle. And it cycles just like a standard AR. There's a special buffer and special buffer spring just for the setup. But when it comes forward again after cycling, you'll see that it locks this ball back in and the gas key slides all the way forward. So you have basically a bolt action that's a semi-auto, or however you want to word it. But it's an amazing system. It's actually more accurate than my custom match bolt gun that I used to use, which is why I'm using this system now. But it is very cool. It's not blowback like everything else. It is a true gas system. All right, so the next question that I get relatively often is, what scope are you using for this rifle? I use a Citron S3 10 to 50 power by 60 millimeter objective. This with 50x power and the MOAH reticle. It's a really great set of glass. It's incredibly clear, even all the way up at 50x. Really cool scope. It's the first Citron that I bought, and I have bought several since then. But it is an amazing piece of glass. It tracks amazingly well. Like I said, super clear. And I wanted something that was in the 50 to 60x range because I knew this was built for bench rest type things, prone, match shooting, which is ultra precision type stuff. And then I was going to use it for long range as well. So it was kind of a really good combination of everything that I needed. This is kind of a popular one that I get too, is why is your scope sitting so high off the rail? Looks kind of janky, you know, or some variation of that. That is a really good question. And I'll put a picture of why it's this way so you can understand a little bit better. But essentially, so the reason that it's sitting so high off the rail, it does look like it's kind of, you know, out of place, because typically you want your scope as low as you can to the bore axis. But the reason is because I have this really cool thing called a Moab, Minute of Angle Base by Cold Shot. And what this does is with this thumb wheel, I can adjust. I actually have a dial on this side, a little knob that sticks out. Focus, stupid. But what that allows me to do is dial in my elevation up to 300 MOA on this base. So essentially, when I'm out shooting, depending on what distance I'm going, you know, it could be something like this, you know, which is somewhere in the ballpark of 1,000 yards, because I'm not counting how many rotations I'm doing right now. But when you get real crazy, this is what happens. This is right at 300 MOA right now. It's just barely clearing the rail. So this gives you an idea of how much cant I can give the scope. And when you look at it from back a ways, it looks pretty ridiculous. That setup will get me just a little over 1,200 yards when I'm dialed at 300 MOA. And that's 300 without touching the internal elevation on the glass. So I can get actually a little bit extra, but I don't like messing with the glass too much unless I need to. So this is the biggest reason that it looks so awkward, you know, as I dial this back, and why it sits so high. Now, another part of what people say as part of that question is, well, how do you get a good cheek weld if it's raised up? That's a really good question. So I keep my cheek weld, actually, instead of being up here, which is where I would typically have it for my centerfire rifles and even some of my other rimfires, this one I keep actually just down here, closer to the lower part of the cheek, actually almost down to the chin and the jawbone. And the reason I do that is this rifle has even less recoil because of the gas system and the buffer and everything that's in it that is custom tuned for this rifle. There is no movement. So the only thing I have to do is make sure that my head isn't going to be moving. So I put it here. And with that Luth MBA 3 stock, it's got the adjustable piece there, but it's not quite high enough when I've got that dialed all the way up. So I actually built some aluminum pieces that go on the rails so I can extend that whole cheek piece up higher. Now, it took a little bit of engineering to be able to do that, but and I didn't pull those pieces out. But I can raise that up almost double the height of stock, which does give me a good weld on the rifle, even when it's dialed in all the way. So it's not the prettiest looking thing when it's up like that, but it does work really well. Sometimes people are asking, well, does it impede, does the barrel or the rail impede the scope when it's canted all the way forward? The answer is no. That particular scope does not pick up any shadowing, does not pick up anything from the barrel or the rail. So I can run it at 300 MOA and not have any issues whatsoever with having the system set up like that. You know, you don't get any muzzle flash kickback in the scope. So really good setup. And going along with that, I get asked about the rail that I have on the front. I'll show you guys that. So you'll notice this is not a typical shape rail that I have fore end. It's flat on the bottom, straight sides, and then a triangular top. This is a Seekins SP3R rail, 15 inch. I run this on a couple of my rifles, and I absolutely love them. They're great for barricades. They're great for big flat bottom bipods like this one. You can get them in M-Lock or Gmod, so they're great rails. They come with the barrel nut as well, and they lock in really securely. They don't move. Really nice. So moving on, let's go into a little bit of ammo for a minute, and then we'll go back to some other stuff. But I talk a lot about reloading my 17 HMRs, and a lot of people are going, what do you mean reloading? It's a rimfire. You can't reload a rimfire, whatever, you know. So I'll put a link to a couple of my reloading videos, but actually, let's say right up here, we're gonna put a link to the playlist with all my reloading videos, which I think is 4 or 5, something like that. That's gonna grow. But people don't understand that you can, in fact, load/reload a rimfire. I use Primal priming compound. It's a 4-part mixture. Pack it into the rim. Won't get into any of that technical stuff because that's in the videos, but it's kind of a pain in the butt process. You have to be ultra precise with your primer if you want to be consistent. You have to be ultra precise with your powder. I go down to 1/100th of a grain on everything, so it's as consistent as possibly can be. Not a fun process at all, and I'm going to tell you right now, if you're looking at those reloading videos, those were just kind of thrown together. Those are not how I load my match rounds. I just kind of wanted to whip through some that were just used for general plinking around my farm, up at the range, that kind of stuff. But I'm far more precise on my match rounds, and maybe I'll do a video of how I do that and how accurate I do everything. But I use 20 grain Lehigh Defense pills, which my camera is not going to focus on. So I'll take some stills so you guys can see the bullet that I'm using. And a lot of people think it's .177 caliber, which is the size of a BB and a pellet gun pellet. It is not. These projectiles are actually .172. So common misconception. So you can look online at .172 projectiles if it's something you're interested in. And this is what a finished round looks like. Again, camera's not going to focus, so we'll get some still pictures in there. But it's a pain in the butt. I don't recommend it unless you're shooting matches, ultra long range, something like that. All my dies had to be custom made. And nobody produces them. Nobody makes, let me pull one of these. Nobody makes empty cases that you can buy, so you actually have to scrap factory ammo in order to load. Of course, you can reload spent brass. That's an even bigger pain in the butt than using factory ammo, scrapping what it comes from with the factory, but not for the faint of heart. Takes a long time, a lot of headaches, so not a fun process. But I use little gun powder and like I said, the primal compound and 20 grain Lehigh Defense. Sometimes I use 18 grain depending on what I'm doing, or I can use 8208 XBR, again depending on variables. But my go-to is the 20 grain with little gun. Let's see. Next one. Does HMR factory ammo have stability limits that prevent them from going long range? I have heard some people have trouble with keyholing at longer ranges, you know, like 400, 500, 600 yards. That is not my experience, and that goes with this particular rifle and my 22-inch barrel and my former match rifle, which has a 21-inch barrel. All three of those I can shoot 600 yards, no problem, no keyholing, unless I've got wind coming either from the front or a good side wind coming. If it's relatively calm, factory 20 grain, which I don't have handy, but factory 20 grain FMJs, I've done out actually to 800 yards with straight in impacts, so no problems with the factory 20 grain FMJs from CCI. And 450 yards I've shot the Hornady VMAX, and I've had straight in impacts, so no problems there. So for me, between three different barrels, I have not had issues with going relatively long with factory ammo. The biggest thing is that you've got variation in primer, variation in how much powder, and so those things are going to have an effect on it. If your barrel isn't perfect, that's going to have a thing with it, because what that can do is you can get just a slight little mark somewhere on the bullet, and once it goes transonic, it's going to destabilize with that little nick. So there's quite a few things that can go into that, but out of a really good barrel, and you have good ammo through it, you should not be seeing keyholing unless the conditions just are really poor. So what is the farthest that I have shot an HMR? Is it 1,000 yards? No. I have actually had a single hit at 1,200 yards, and that was after shooting about 30 rounds to get it in there. That was with my reloads, but 1,200 yards was my maximum. It was not fun trying to walk it in there. A little bit of wind made stupid amount of difference. You could be 30 feet left, you could be 5 feet right, and then 20 feet left, and then 40 feet left, and then 19 feet right. It was crazy. It was almost kind of a crapshoot, and I'm hoping that with some really calm days, I'm going to be able to get that dialed in at 1,200 yards a little bit better. But days to be able to shoot like that are, maybe 5 to 8 days a year where I'm at. So option isn't there very often. 1,000 yards I'm getting better at, so that can happen a little bit more often. But yeah, 1,200 yards is my maximum with this particular rifle and ammo combo. So I've had a few people ask me, can I buy the same setup that you have? Can you build me one, or build me a custom one that's similar, that's a 17 HMR? Okay, so I live in Washington State, which is getting to be absolutely ridiculous with semi-autos. There's a lot of laws around semi-autos right now and licensing things. They're trying to crack down even more. So what I am willing to do with my resources is I can build you a custom upper. I can design it exactly the same as what I've got here. I can build custom uppers around the 17 HMR platform till the cows come home, providing that the barrel, the bolt carrier group, and the upper receiver are available from Garrow Firearms Development, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I can build the upper to whatever specs you want. If it's identical to mine, that's fine. And lower stuff, I'm not going to touch lowers because of the laws in Washington State. So what I'm willing to do as far as a lower is I can provide all the parts. I can provide everything that you need to build an identical lower or a spec'd out lower, including parts from my company. Everything that you need I can provide for your lower. I can build the upper and I can send it to you. The reason that Washington is so nuts on this stuff, why it makes it such a pain in the butt, is because anything that is a semi-auto, you have to license and go through a whole lot of headaches with training classes, registering all these things. It's a complete nightmare. So I'm willing to do everything I can, and then you would have to take it to a gunsmith to have them put it together, or if you have the resources to build a lower, I've got all the parts that I'll send you, so you can build it yourself. However you want to do it, I'm willing to work with you, other than touching a physical lower receiver. And so we can get you something built. I can provide parts list if you want to build it yourself, but I'm willing to help out however I can. Don't worry, I'm not going to charge an arm and a leg for it. My company does a lot of accurizing stuff, so if you want me to build you an upper, I can do a lot of the fine-tuning type things. I can fine-tune accuracy, functionality, reliability, all those things. So I touched on providing that I can get the parts from Garo Firearms Development. I know there's a lot of people that are wanting to buy the basic Garo Firearms Development 17 HMR upper, which is it's an upper with the barrel, gas system, bolt carrier group, upper receiver. It's a ready to run 17 HMR upper. Just a factory unit. Right now, Mike Garo and we talk quite a bit. He's in a holding pattern with his company. There were some really bad things that happened in 2019 in regards to a business partner that really hurt the company, and he's had to go through a whole restructuring period. So I won't get into a lot of those details, but it was really hard on the company, and so he's having to do a lot of damage repair. So he's in a company restructure right now, not in a position to be producing uppers. He and I have been talking about how we can get uppers back into production ASAP, even if I have to build some with him. So I'm going to keep putting out updates as we talk, as things get ironed out. And as soon as those are available, I will let you guys know. And anybody who wants one custom built, modified, whatever, we can go from there and figure out what you want to do. I'm hoping that that's going to be really soon too. So what is the world record that you're working on? Distance with repeatability. It's one thing for somebody to go out, pull the trigger 600 times and get a hit at 1,000 yards. That's not the point that myself, Lehigh Defense, and Garo Firearms Development feel like shows the real capability of the equipment. We want to be able to do it with repeatability, which means we have to have higher than a 50% hit rate. So the goal is to fire 10 rounds at 1,000 yards and have 5 or more impacts on a 36-inch target, which is regulation. In practice, a few weeks ago, I actually had 5 out of 10. A couple days ago, I went back out, hit 4 out of 10, but it was a tighter group. So I'm working on trying to iron out some things with wind, with creating some more dope stuff. But definitely distance with repeatability is the key. Do I use my HMRs to hunt, and what distance am I comfortable with a small target? Yes, not this particular rifle, but I do use my former match rifle, 17 HMR to hunt small game around my farm. And what distance am I comfortable with a small target, rabbit size, something like that? I personally, in a low wind situation, would be comfortable at 300 yards on a small game target with factory ammo. With factory ammo, high wind, I'd say 200 yards. I'm big on ethical kills, not just hitting an animal, but I want it to drop in its tracks right where it's at. So those are the distances I'm comfortable with shooting small critters. If it's something like a coyote, I'd say maybe 150 yards if I can get a good headshot. If I can't get a good headshot, I'm not going to go with that caliber for a coyote. Can I make you a reloading kit or make me some ammo? Okay, I'm planning on producing some 17 HMR cedar dies in the future. Hopefully, actually, maybe in the next couple months is the plan, but there's been some possibilities of moving, so that's still up in the air. As soon as I can get those produced, a lot of people have shown interest in getting the cedar dies for the 17 HMR. As soon as that's going to happen, I will put out another feeler for people that are interested. I'm not going to do all the other dies that I have. I'm only going to be doing the cedar dies at this point. Can I put together a basic kit? Yes, I can put together a kit of bullet puller, cedar die, priming compound if you want it, you know, all the little odds and ends, the shell holder, all those kinds of things. I can put together all that stuff and provide a basic kit. But I will not produce ammunition for other people. There's a lot of legal junk that goes along with ammunition. I'm not in a position to get into that legal headache, so I will not be manufacturing custom loads for people. I may be working with a company that is going to produce some custom loads, and I'll keep you guys apprised if that does come around. They will have the legal ability to produce ammo to spec. How do I create my own load data? So a combination of using quick load and trial and error. And part of trial and error is I have broken a lot of parts. It's a long story, but the last time that I fired, I had broken parts. I couldn't hear out of one ear, even with hearing protection on. I couldn't hear out of one ear for about an hour. It sounded like a pipe bomb went off. So it wasn't fun to do that, but it took, I'd say, eight solid months to come up with some good loads. It was a pain in the butt to figure out, though. How do you collect data on each engagement? So when I'm out shooting, I log everything. I log every weather variable, and if it's changing throughout the time, I will log multiple times throughout the day. You know, if the temperature is changing a lot, the humidity, wind direction, any of those things. Anytime there's a change in any variable, I'm logging that, and then as I'm shooting, I'm logging the results. The direction I'm shooting, I log, and that has to do with Coriolis effect. Coriolis effect, if you don't know, is the time it takes from the time you fire until impact. The Earth is rotating, as we know, and because of that rotation, the target is actually in a different location than it was when you pulled the trigger. So Coriolis effect has to do with rotation of the Earth, and the direction you're firing has to do with how much that's affected. So I log the direction I'm shooting, altitude if it's different from my general home area. I do a lot of trial and error on variables as I get to different distances. I will shoot without adjusting my windage or anything, just on a basic 0, and I'll log what my spin drift is as I walk things in. Spin drift, any other variables, I will log all that as I'm dialing. So I have all my corrected data for this rifle, that ammo, and all the conditions that could possibly be identified. And I compile all that into multiple spreadsheets, and I've got a complete database now of all variables at different ranges, and really helps me dial in. But as I'm going further and further out, I've got to create whole new sections of the databases because there's no dope on any of that. The final one that I have written down, and this is one that I've heard a lot over the last few weeks since I've been shooting 1,000 yards. What is the bullet drop at 1,000 yards? It depends on the wind direction, because if I've got a tailwind, it's not as much. If I've got a headwind, it's a whole lot more. But let's say I would put it right about in the average of 184.75 MOA at 1,000 yards with these loads. And that's, you know, plus or minus like 3, 4, 5 MOA depending on the wind and direction. But 184.75 MOA is just over 161 feet of drop. So you're talking a 16-story building worth of drop on the bullet at that distance. So it gets pretty crazy. Just so you know, at 1,200 yards, I'm just pulling off the top of my head. If I remember correctly, it was like 282 MOA. And if I punch in 282 MOA, pull it up here. 282 MOA at 1,200 yards gives me 3,543 inches. 3543 divided by 12 equals just over 295 feet of drop at 1,200 yards. And that's, if those numbers are right off the top of my head, I can't remember, but yeah, it's a lot of drop, a lot of craziness, a lot of fun though, and a lot of headache. So everything that I do for the 17 HMR, there's a reason the gun is designed this way. There's a reason that I do the things that I do. The equipment that I have, everything is designed for shooting matches and for shooting long range. So those are the major questions I get asked, and over time, if there's more questions that people ask regularly, I'll start building another list of FAQs and go through that down the road. But you guys can feel free to keep asking questions. I'll respond as I can. So I'm really excited about the stuff that's going on, about the fun projects in the works for the future with the 17 HMR. And I just really appreciate the support of my sponsors, the support of you guys. Makes it a lot more fun to be able to share this kind of stuff. So thank you very much. Hope that answered some of your questions. If it brought up more questions, feel free to shoot them out to me on my Facebook page, my Instagram page, any of those things. My Instagram is Booger Hook Off the Bang Switch. My Facebook page is Russell Reed Competitor. So you can hit me up, you can PM me, whatever you want to do. So thank you guys, and have a great day.